A common problem people have with performing home exercises is a lack of equipment or lack of space. And so this video has a couple of exercise progressions for the hamstrings, glutes, and quads that require minimal equipment. The first exercise is a long lever bridge, which helps to strengthen the hamstrings as a hip extender versus a hip flexor. And so what we'll do is we'll lay on our back. And so it's going to look very similar to a glute bridge, which would be just like this. But to target the hamstrings, we're going to try to push our feet away from us as much as we can. So we can start by an isometric exercise where we'll dig our heels down into the ground, lift our hips up, and we can hold this position for somewhere between 30 to 45 seconds. To make this exercise harder, we could just move our feet further out and repeat the same thing. Once we're able to do that, we can also modify this exercise into a single leg version where we'll just have our leg up and we'll lift up, hold, so we're working on that right hamstring here. We can then progress this into a hamstring curl, which will target both the hamstrings as a knee flexor as well as a hip extender. And so what we'll do is we'll have some sort of slider. So these are furniture sliders, but a frisbee works, or if you're on hardwood, you could just put down a towel and use that to help slide. And so what we'll do is we'll lift our hips up, we'll push out as far as we can go, and then pull back towards us. And then we could just repeat these for reps. To progress this exercise, we can remove one of the sliders again. And then what we'll do is we'll just repeat on just a single leg. So we'll lift up, out as far as we can go, and then back up. We can also strengthen the hamstrings as a hip extender using a bench. And so we can do a modified hip lift. And so what we'll do is we'll lay on our back with our heels on the bench or chair. And what we'll do from here is we're just going to lift our hips up off the ground and then slowly back down. Typically in the beginning we'll do a cadence of 3 to 4 seconds up, followed by 3 to 4 seconds back down. The further away we have our feet, so the more straight our knees are, the more we'll work the hamstrings as a hip extender, so the harder it'll be. Again, we can progress this exercise into a single leg variation, so we'll just take one of our legs off, and then go up, and then slowly back down. And again, the further out we go, so the more straight that knee is, the harder it'll be on the proximal hamstring. For the next exercise, you'll need an exercise band, and it can be anchored to something heavy, so a piece of furniture, a kettlebell, or if you have a loop for the door, you can attach it into a door frame as well. And so the first exercise we'll do is a standing hip extension exercise. So we're just going to wrap the band around our ankle, and if you need to, you can use a wall or a chair as balance. And so what we'll do is we'll stand on a single leg, and then we're going to work on just extending our leg here. And so the big key for this exercise is that we want to stay neutral through the low back, and that we're not arching through that low back, but we're actually just focusing on extending through the hip. And if you need to, you can use your hand as a little bit of guidance to see if you're actually extending through that low back or not. Another exercise that we can do with this same setup is a sprinter's curl, which will work the hamstrings as a knee flexor. And so what we'll do is we'll still have the exercise band around our ankle, and we're going to lift up our leg on a single stance. And then from here what we're going to do is we're going to flex our knee and then back and repeat that for reps. And so again, if you need something for balance, you can use a wall or a chair to help you. With this same setup, we can also work a single leg deadlift. And so what we'll do is we'll have the exercise band and we'll hold it with one hand. And what we're going to do is we're going to be on a single leg. And so this is the leg that we're actually going to work. So in this case, it'll be my left hamstring. And so what we'll do is we'll lean forward towards the anchor point and then come back up. All the movement is coming from the hip. And so that way, as we're pulling back up towards us, we're working on that hamstring and glute as a hip extender. We want to make sure that we're not bending through that low back. So we're extending through there and then flexing back. That we're keeping the core nice and still, and then just engaging the glute and hamstring as we go. And similar to the last exercise, if you need a little bit of feedback, you can put your hand on your belly button or on your low back to feel if that spine is moving at all while you're going through the exercise. And then we can progress to deadlifts and single leg deadlifts. And we can use a backpack with some stuff inside of it for a little bit of external load. So I'm putting a couple of textbooks in my backpack. For the deadlift, we'll just hold at the top here, and we're going to push our hips back towards the wall, and then back up. And then we can progress to a single leg deadlift, which is going to be very similar to the deadlift, just on a single leg. So again, we'll have our backpack here for a little bit of external load, and we'll bend down towards the ground, and then back up. We can bend this knee a little bit if we need to for a little bit of stability. The more straight this leg is, the more you're going to target the hamstring. And so big thing here is we want to make sure that the core and the spine is remaining in neutral and that we're not flexing or extending that low back. And so if we need to, we can use our hand on our belly button again for a little bit of feedback. And so it's important when we're doing a single leg deadlift that this pelvis remains level and that we're not rotating it as we go down either way. So we want to make sure that the spine remains in neutral and that we're not rotating the hips at all as we go down into the single leg deadlift. For quad exercises, we could start with a wall sit, which is an isometric exercise for the quads. And so we'll just come up against the wall here, and then we'll hold this position for 30 to 45 seconds. It's important that if we're dealing with a highly reactive proximal hamstring tendon, that we actually don't sit too deep into this wall sit, because that will lead to a little bit of compression and some irritation. So we might actually need to stay a little bit higher up, and then we can just hold for a longer duration, or we can use some sort of external load, so we can hold the backpack or groceries or something in our hands to make this exercise a little bit more challenging. We can then progress to a split squat to help strengthen the quads. And so we can use a backpack for a little bit of external load. And we're going to have our feet separated. The closer they are together in terms of width, the more challenging it's going to be for balance. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drop this knee down towards the ground. And so it's going to look something like this. And so again, if we're dealing with a highly reactive proximal hamstring tendon, then we might want to be careful of going all the way down into this position, because it might irritate it because of the compression. So we might actually not go that low. But if we can tolerate it, then we can bring that knee as close to the ground as we can get it. We can then progress these straight into squats. So we can use it as a goblet squat. So we can hold the backpack in front of us, down into the squat, and then back up. If we want to, we can just change this into a regular back squat by just putting the backpack on our backs and then doing the same thing. Another exercise that we can do to help strengthen the quads as well as the glutes is a step up. And so we'll need a bench or a chair. And what we'll do is we'll start in this position here. For this exercise, it's important that our hips come down as a unit. So as we lower ourselves down, we want to make sure that the pelvis is coming down as a unit and that we're not letting ourselves dip down. Another important tip with this exercise is that our knee is staying in line with our toes and hips, and we're not letting that knee drift in. And so for the glutes, we can start off with a glute bridge. And so we'll lay on our back. And then from here, what we're going to do is we'll just lift our hips up off the ground and then back down. There's many different ways that we can progress this exercise. So one of them is that we can lift our hips up off the ground, hold, and then extend one of our legs, and then come back. And so when we do that, we want to make sure that our pelvis stays level and that we don't rotate our hips at all, that we stay up. That'll help engage that glute. We can also transition into a single leg glute bridge, and so we'll just hold back behind our knee, lift up, and then back down. For the glutes, we can do a hip thrust exercise, and so we'll need a bench or a chair to perform this exercise. And so what we'll do is we'll lay on the chair. We want to keep our chin tucked. That'll help make sure that our low back doesn't go into too much extension. And so what we'll do from here is we're going to drop our hips down towards the ground and then back up. And so to add a little bit of extra load, we can take our backpack again, rest it on our pelvis, and then repeat the same thing.